What's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today we're talking about a 2002 thriller that I've always loved. It's Phone Booth. Starring Colin Farrell and Kiefer Sutherland, this is something that I've always seen as absolutely nuts and a perfect film to showcase a tense atmosphere, but a lot of time has passed from then until now, and now we have movies like Uncut Gems that more accurately showcase tension, but this is still a solid thriller, and that's something that I think is immutable. Let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, immutable. Unchanging over time. Phone Booth follows around Stu Shepard, a New York agent has just found himself in a bit of a pickle. In one of the last phone booths in New York City, a psychopath is targeting Stu and keeping him captive on the line. If he hangs up, the psychopath killer will shoot somebody nearby with a sniper rifle. To make things worse, false witnesses claim that Stu's the one that's been shooting people, which makes police surround Stu, ready for anything. So I'm going to do this review a little bit differently. I'm going to bring it back to the way that I used to review movies, and I'm going to break this thing down with my rating model to remind everybody about how I personally see these movies and what goes through my weird little head. I rate these movies categorically. 6 categories, almost all of them have 5 subcategories that add up to 100 possible stars. The first of the categories is the people category, which looks at acting, characters, casting, individual importance of the characters, and everybody's chemistry together. Now, the thing that stands out to me in this category is the fact that they made some safe decisions here, because none of the subcategories got a perfect or terrible score here. A lot of it was good, yes, but nothing was perfect. That leads me to believe that they didn't take any appropriate risks, which is a huge shock to me because the main thing that you do think about this movie is Kiefer Sutherland and his terrifying, mysterious, and downright evil character. When it comes down to Kiefer, only 2 roles of his stand out to me as perfect casting. That's Jack Bauer, obviously, and this guy. In fact, I think this is my favorite film role of his ever. But if it's so perfect, then how is it safe? Because Kiefer was the only good character. He was the only one that felt perfectly cast. Everybody else is forgettable. Even Colin Farrell, who you see throughout the movie the most, not a likable guy. You don't remember his performance. You don't remember what he does for a living. You don't remember why he is targeted. He's just a conduit for the story to just keep going. That's not good. A big part of the plot also revolves around the fact that he's married, he has a girlfriend on the side, and you don't really remember them either. So it's being pretty safe because literally everybody other than Kiefer Sutherland is dragging it down and preventing perfection. So the people category gets a rating of 14 out of 20 possible stars. The good news is the people category is the only category that made safe decisions. Next is the writing category, which goes over the dialogue, balance or pacing, story depth, originality, and how interesting the concept is. So this is a nearly perfect category. They obviously pulled a lot of focus on how this film operated from a writer's perspective. The first thing that stands out is obviously the dialogue, which is insanely good thanks to Kiefer Sutherland, but it's also a rising tension kind of film, so the pacing is very, very good. Not a lot of movies take place in just one spot, so part of that makes it feel really original, and obviously the concept is interesting enough to get you to watch it in the first place, and it keeps your interest throughout. With that, the writing category gets 9 out of 10 stars. The next category is BTS Behind the Scenes, which covers visuals, cinematography, editing, advertisement, and the music or sound. On average, the BTS category might get 6 or 7 stars, so because I scored this 8, I do consider it above average for Behind the Scenes, which means that something about it stood out as good. More specifically, the visuals and the editing. Visually, there's a blue hue throughout the film, but that's not really what stands out to me. Visuals stands for a lot of different things for me. It means CGI, it means practical effects, it means hair, it means makeup, or whatever. In this case, it's the production design that stands out. You're talking about a full movie that takes place centering on a phone booth, one spot. So that setting then becomes a character. So thinking back to the movie, you do visually think about this phone booth. Next is the editing, because there's so much focus on Stu in this phone booth, it just throws up windows here and there on the screen to show you what's happening outside the phone booth, like cops talking, like people reacting, like a shot of the sniper scope, stuff like that. But because it never really cuts away from Stu, I look at that as an editing thing. Everything else in this category was neither great or terrible, and that's why we land at 8 out of 10. Next up is the narrative arc score, which covers introduction, inciting incident, obstacles, climax, and resolution. You know, the story arc that you were taught in English class. It is important. Without it, you severely risk ruining the pacing. But in this case, you actually get a weird result because you have a movie with an imperfect narrative arc, but the pacing, thankfully, isn't affected. As you can see, the two areas that weren't scored perfectly here were the obstacles and resolution. That's because the movie isn't really about anything. You got Kiefer Sutherland talking to Colin Farrell, but he's not exactly trying to do anything specifically. He's like a psychopathic troll, right? He's trying to make Colin's character squirm. But if you think about it, he's mostly flying by the seat of his pants. As for Stu, he's also not really trying to do anything specifically. Maybe survive and talk his way out of it, but there's still no real obstacles. There's like one, survive. But it doesn't get any more complex than that, so there's no real obstacles. As for resolution, that's also fine, but what I look for is a calming down moment and a sense of new norm. I think what's missing here is a sense of new norm. It's almost like they wanted to make a sequel or something, but everything else in this category is rated perfectly, even the introduction, which I think is the most forgettable part of the movie. It still does everything that it needs to do to introduce you to the world, to the characters within it, and the overall atmosphere. It might be forgettable, it might be, but that doesn't really matter. 8 out of 10. Everything that I've just mentioned goes to play into my unbiased score, because a majority of that was technical things that I look for. From this point forward, everything's going to be biased. So we're looking at the entertainment category, which covers things like rewatchability, how much of a good time you have while watching, your impulse to buy or own it, your impulse to talk about it or recommend it to others, and how engaging it is, which means, do you feel like you will miss something important if you look away for a second? What I typically look for with the entertainment category is a 5 out of 10 rating. That means I was generally entertained by it, just not blown away. So because I scored it 8 out of 10, it is once again above average, and certain things definitely impressed me. And those things are the rewatchability factor, how much of a good time I had while watching, and how engaging it was. I have, and will again, watch this movie over and over again because I do have a great time while watching it, and if I look away, I truly do feel like I'll miss something vital. As for the rest, well, I wouldn't mind adding it to my collection, but I don't feel like I'd buy it. I'd just add it to like a birthday wish list or something. And when I hear people say they haven't seen it, I feel like maybe asking them why, maybe talk about it a little bit, but I don't have an overwhelming urge to recommend it. Take that as you will, 8 out of 10. Next up is the specialty category, and this contains 4 subcategories that change depending on the movie. And because these are super important, they have the highest possible star rating. Now, these could be anything, but they usually have to do with expectations. What do you expect from the movie? Like actor specific, if you like one of the actors. Like genre specific, franchise specific, if it's part of a series. Universe specific, director specific, writer specific. You get the gist. Things that change depending on the movie, because I feel like this is really important and is the primary thing that changes depending on who you are when you watch a movie. For Phone Booth, what is it that draws you in and makes you want to see it? Probably Kiefer Sutherland's role and the fact that this is a thriller, and both of these elements are really fantastic, so they both got a 10 out of 10 score. Another specialty category I often use is old score, because when I used to rate movies, I didn't have a rating model. I had a number that floated around in my head that just felt right. And I've been adding that number to my specialty category recently. For Phone Booth, the number that floats around in my head is 9 out of 10. It's that good, so I added that number here. And finally, halfway decent. This means, did they make the movie that they intended to make for their intended target audience? Also, could you make it? Because if you couldn't, that deserves praise on its own. For Phone Booth, that's another perfect 10 out of 10. When we average these scores all together, my unbiased score was 78%. Because while some of the things in the visuals impressed me, there were some areas that were lacking at the same time. Meanwhile, my bias score is 94% because that's what this movie is. It's a ton of fun. Once you average everything together, you come to a final score of 86%, 86 out of 100 possible stars, granting Phone Booth with a letter grade of B+, which is very good. So now that we're done, I think you can appreciate my abbreviated reviews that just kind of summarize everything and just keep it short. This is how I used to review movies, and it explains why I call my channel Interpreting the Stars, but I can't always make a breakdown like this. Anyways, let's hear your thoughts on Phone Booth in the comments down below. What you think about it? Is this Kiefer Sutherland's best film role? Let's hear it! And as for YouTube, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button if you like this review, because there's more like it coming out. Hit the thumbs up button, because that always helps out my channel. And don't forget about the little bell icon, because that'll help notify you when I come out with the next review. And until then, peace out!